The final notes echoed through the smoke-filled saloon in Montana City, Montana Territory, as Priscilla Vance let her fingers rest on the ivory keys, knowing she would never play professionally again after tonight in this God-forsaken town, where dreams came to die. The year was 1878, and at 23 years old, she had decided that 8 years of playing piano in dusty saloons for drunken miners and rowdy cowboys was enough torture for one lifetime. Her mother had taught her to play Chopin and Beethoven in their Boston parlor, never imagining her daughter would end up hammering out bawdy tunes in the rough Montana Territory. But consumption had taken both parents 5 years ago, leaving Priscilla with nothing but her talent and a burning need to survive. She stood from the worn bench, smoothing down her emerald dress that had seen better days. The fabric faded from countless washings, and the hem frayed from dragging through sawdust-covered floors. The saloon owner, a portly man named Dutch Henderson, waddled over with her final payment, pressing the coins into her palm with a grunt. "You sure about leaving, Prissy?" he asked, his breath reeking of whiskey. "The boys like you. You bring class to this establishment." "My name is Priscilla, and yes, I am certain," she replied, her Boston accent still crisp despite years in the West. "I have saved enough to buy passage on the stagecoach to San Francisco. I hear there are respectable music halls there, places where a woman can teach piano to proper children instead of entertaining drunks." Dutch shrugged and walked away, already forgetting about her. That was how it went in Montana City. People came and went like tumbleweeds, blown by fortune or misfortune, never putting down real roots. Priscilla had told herself she would not become one of those permanent fixtures, growing old and worn like the piano she played, its keys yellowed and some notes forever silent. She gathered her shawl and reticule, taking one last look at the battered upright piano that had been her constant companion. Tomorrow morning, she would board the stage heading west, leaving behind the bitter cold winters, the endless dust, and the rough men who thought a woman alone was an invitation for their unwanted advances. Her small room above the millinery shop was already packed, her few belongings waiting in a carpet-bag. The doors to the saloon swung open, letting in a blast of cold October air. Priscilla glanced up, expecting to see another drunk stumbling in for one more glass of rot-gut whiskey. Instead, a tall figure stood silhouetted against the lamplight from the street, his broad shoulders nearly filling the doorframe. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing sandy brown hair that needed cutting and a face weathered by sun and wind but still handsome in a rugged way. His eyes, she noticed as he came closer, were an unusual shade of gray-blue, like a winter sky before snow. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice deep and surprisingly gentle. "Are you the piano player?" "I was," Priscilla replied, already moving toward the door. "My employment here has concluded." "Wait, please." He followed her, his spurs jingling softly. "I need to ask you something important. My name is Jackson Sullivan, and I have a ranch about 15 miles south of town. I am getting married in 3 weeks, and my intended and I would like to have music at our wedding. I heard you play just now through the window, and you are exactly what we need. Real music, not just a fiddle and harmonica. Would you consider playing for us? I will pay you well." Priscilla stopped, her hand on the door. 3 weeks. That would delay her departure, but the money could be useful. San Francisco was expensive, and she would need time to establish herself there. She turned to face Jackson Sullivan properly, taking in his appearance. He wore typical cowboy attire, denim pants, a worn leather vest over a blue shirt, and boots that had seen plenty of use. But there was something different about him, a certain dignity in his bearing, an intelligence in his eyes that suggested he was more than just another rough cattleman. "How much are you offering?" she asked, ever practical. $50, he said without hesitation. "Plus room and board at the ranch until the wedding. My intended lives with her aunt in town, so it would be proper. My ranch hands are decent men and my foreman's wife cooks for everyone. You would have your own quarters." $50 was generous, more than generous. That was nearly 3 months' wages at the saloon for a single day's work. Priscilla felt suspicion rise. Why so much, and why me specifically? There are other musicians in Montana City. Jackson shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "Because my intended Sarah wants everything to be special. She grew up in St. Louis, came out here to live with her aunt after her parents passed. She misses the refinements of city life. I want to give her the best wedding I can afford. She deserves that much for agreeing to marry a rancher and live out here in this rough country." There was genuine affection in his voice when he spoke of his intended, and Priscilla felt her resistance weakening. She had always been a romantic at heart, despite the harsh realities of her life. The idea of playing at a wedding, celebrating love and hope instead of drowning out the sorrows and sins of the saloon, appealed to her deeply. "Very well," she heard herself say. "But I leave for San Francisco the day after the wedding, no delays. I have my own plans." Relief flooded Jackson's face, transforming it. When he smiled, Priscilla noticed how it softened his features, revealing dimples in his weathered cheeks. "Thank you, miss. You do not know how much this means to me, to us. When can you come out to the ranch? Sarah will want to meet you and discuss what songs to play." "I can come tomorrow afternoon," Priscilla said. "I need to settle my affairs in town first. Where exactly is your ranch?" "The Sullivan Ranch, about an hour's ride south on the main trail. You cannot miss it. There's an archway over the entrance with our brand. If you come to the general store at noon, I will be in town for supplies, and you can ride out with me in the wagon." "I will be there," Priscilla agreed, already wondering if she had made a mistake. But $50 was $50, and she could endure 3 more weeks in Montana territory for that sum. Jackson replaced his hat, tipping it politely to her. "Until tomorrow, then, Miss Vance. Good evening to you." He knew her name. Of course he did. Everyone knew everyone in a town this small. Priscilla watched him leave, his tall frame disappearing into the night, and felt an odd flutter in her chest that she firmly ignored. He was engaged to be married. She was leaving for California. There was no room in her life for foolish sentiments, especially not for a cowboy rancher who was already spoken for. She left the saloon and walked the short distance to her rented room, the cold air biting through her thin shawl. Montana City was quiet at this hour, most of the rowdiness contained within the saloons and gambling halls. The respectable people, if they could be called that, were already in bed. Priscilla climbed the narrow stairs behind the millinery shop and let herself into her small room. It was sparse but clean, containing only a narrow bed, a washstand, a chest for her clothes, and a rickety chair by the window. She prepared for bed, her mind churning with this unexpected development. 3 more weeks. She could manage that. And afterward, she would have enough money to live comfortably in San Francisco while she found a respectable position. Perhaps she could even rent a small studio and take on students of her own. The dream seemed almost within reach now. That night, she dreamed of music, but not the raucous songs of the saloon. Instead, she heard wedding marches and love songs, played on a fine grand piano in a beautiful parlor somewhere far from the dust and roughness of Montana territory. Morning came too quickly. Priscilla rose, washed with cold water from the pitcher, and dressed in her best day dress, a navy blue wool that was only slightly worn at the cuffs. She pinned her dark auburn hair into a neat bun and covered it with her bonnet. After a meager breakfast of bread and preserves, she informed Mrs. Patterson, who owned the millinery shop, that she would be away for 3 weeks, working a ranch. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. "Priscilla Vance, what are you thinking?" "I am thinking that $50 will set me up nicely in San Francisco," Priscilla replied calmly. "And I will be playing piano at a wedding, not working cattle. It is perfectly respectable." Mrs. Patterson sniffed but said no more. Priscilla suspected the older woman would miss the rent money more than she would miss her tenant. She packed a larger bag with clothes suitable for an extended stay, including her 2 spare dresses, nightgowns, undergarments, and her precious music books. These leather-bound volumes were among her few remaining possessions from her old life, filled with classical compositions that she had once played for appreciative audiences. At precisely noon, she stood outside the general store, her carpetbag at her feet, waiting. She did not have to wait long. Jackson Sullivan appeared driving a large wagon pulled by 2 sturdy horses, the wagon bed already half filled with supplies. He jumped down with easy grace and tipped his hat to her. "Miss Vance, right on time. I appreciate punctuality." He took her bag and secured it in the wagon, then offered his hand to help her up onto the seat. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm but careful. Priscilla settled her skirts and tried not to notice how the wagon seat forced them to sit quite close together. As they left town, Jackson kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the area. "I have been running the Sullivan Ranch for 5 years now," he explained. "Took it over when my father passed. He homesteaded the land back in 1868, right after the war. Built the ranch from nothing. We run about 500 head of cattle, mostly Herefords. It is not the biggest operation in the territory, but it is profitable and the land is good." "You must have started young," Priscilla observed, "to be running a ranch for 5 years." "I am 28 now," Jackson said. "Grew up working cattle, so I knew the business. My father made sure of that. He believed a man should earn his inheritance through work, not just expect it handed to him." Priscilla did the arithmetic in her head. He had been only 23 when he took over the ranch, younger than she was now. "That must have been difficult, losing your father and taking on such responsibility." "It was," Jackson admitted, his expression growing somber. "But I had good men working for me and my father had taught me well. We managed. Actually, we have done more than manage. We have thrived, which is why I can finally afford to marry and start a proper family." There it was again, that note of genuine warmth when he spoke of marriage. Priscilla found herself curious. "How did you meet your intended?" "You said she is from St. Louis originally. Sarah came to Montana City 2 years ago to live with her aunt after her parents died in a cholera outbreak. Her aunt runs the boarding house on Main Street. I met Sarah at a church social last year. She is refined and educated, everything a man could want in a wife. Her aunt introduced us, and we have been courting properly ever since." Everything he said made sense, painted a picture of a conventional courtship leading to a sensible marriage. Yet something in his tone struck Priscilla as almost rehearsed, as if he was reciting facts rather than speaking from the heart. She chided herself for the thought. Not everyone was demonstrative with their emotions. He had said he wanted to give his intended a special wedding, which showed consideration and care. The ride to the ranch took nearly 90 minutes, the wagon bumping along the rutted trail through rolling grassland, already turning brown with the approach of winter. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks dusted with early snow. The landscape had a harsh beauty that Priscilla had never quite grown accustomed to. It was so different from the gentle green hills of Massachusetts where she had grown up. The Sullivan Ranch appeared as they crested a low hill. True to Jackson's word, an archway marked the entrance, a simple but sturdy construction with the brand burned into the wood. The ranch itself consisted of several buildings. A large main house built of logs with a covered porch, a substantial barn, a bunkhouse, corrals, and various outbuildings. Smoke rose from the main house's chimney, a welcoming sight in the chilly afternoon air. Jackson drove the wagon up to the main house and set the brake. "Home, sweet home," he said with obvious pride. "Let me show you around before I introduce you to the household." He helped her down from the wagon and led her first to the main house. Inside, it was surprisingly comfortable, with sturdy furniture, colorful woven rugs on the plank floors, and curtains at the windows. The front room contained a large stone fireplace, several chairs, and a table. Beyond that, she glimpsed a kitchen and what appeared to be bedrooms at the back. "This is the main house where I live," Jackson explained. "But you will be staying in the old foreman's cabin. It is small but private and much more appropriate. Let me show you." He led her across the yard to a small log cabin set slightly apart from the other buildings. Inside, it was indeed small, just one room with a bed, a wood stove, a table and chairs, and a trunk for storage. But it was clean and snug with a window overlooking the mountains. "Mrs. Chen, that is my foreman's wife. She cleaned it up for you," Jackson said. "I hope it suits. There is firewood stacked outside and meals are served in the main house. Mrs. Chen is an excellent cook." "This is fine," Priscilla assured him. "More than fine, actually. I appreciate the privacy." Relief crossed his face again. "Good. Now let me introduce you to everyone, and then I will take you into town to meet Sarah. She is eager to discuss the music for the wedding." Over the next hour, Priscilla met the ranch household. There was Tom Chen, the foreman, a quiet man of Chinese descent who spoke with precision and obvious intelligence. His wife, Mei Chen, was a small, energetic woman who welcomed Priscilla with genuine warmth. The ranch employed 5 cowboys, all young men in their 20s and 30s, who lived in the bunkhouse. They treated Priscilla with respectful curiosity, clearly unused to having a woman on the ranch who was not Mrs. Chen. After depositing her bag in the cabin and refreshing herself, Priscilla rode back into town with Jackson in the now empty wagon. The sun was starting its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. "Sarah usually helps her aunt at the boarding house in the afternoons," Jackson explained as they approached town. "But I sent word yesterday that we would be calling today." The boarding house was a 2-story frame building, painted white with green shutters, one of the more substantial structures in Montana City. Jackson helped Priscilla down from the wagon and escorted her inside. The front parlor was neat and respectable, with antimacassars on the chairs and a Brussels carpet on the floor. A woman appeared from the back of the house, and Jackson stood straighter. "Sarah, I would like you to meet Miss Priscilla Vance, the pianist I told you about." "Miss Vance, this is my intended, Miss Sarah Miller." Priscilla found herself facing a petite blonde woman who could not have been more than 20 years old. Sarah Miller was undeniably pretty, with porcelain skin, blue eyes, and delicate features. She wore a fashionable dress of pink calico with lace at the collar and cuffs, and her hair was arranged in elaborate curls. She looked exactly like what she was, a city girl trying to maintain her standards in a frontier town. "Miss Vance, how lovely to meet you," Sarah said, her voice high and sweet. "Jackson has told me about your playing. I am simply thrilled to have real piano music at our wedding. Please sit down and we can discuss the details." They settled into the parlor chairs, and Sarah immediately launched into her vision for the wedding. She wanted a traditional ceremony at the small church in town, followed by a reception at the ranch. She had very specific ideas about the music, a processional, hymns during the ceremony, and several popular songs for the reception. "I would particularly like Lorna," Sarah said, clasping her hands together. "It is such a romantic song, do you not think? And perhaps Jeannie with the light brown hair. Oh, and Beautiful Dreamer. Can you play those, Miss Vance?" "Of course," Priscilla assured her. "I know all of those pieces, they are quite popular." "Wonderful," Sarah beamed. "You see, Jackson, I told you everything would work out perfectly. This wedding will be something people talk about for years. It will show everyone that just because we live in the Montana Territory does not mean we cannot have culture and refinement." As Sarah continued to chatter about wedding plans, Priscilla found herself observing the interaction between the engaged couple. Jackson sat quietly, letting Sarah dominate the conversation, occasionally nodding or murmuring agreement. He looked at his intended with a sort of fond indulgence, like one might look at an enthusiastic child. Sarah, for her part, seemed more excited about the wedding itself than about the man she was marrying. She barely looked at Jackson, directing most of her comments to Priscilla. After nearly an hour of wedding discussion, during which every detail from the flowers to the food was dissected, Sarah's aunt appeared with tea and cookies. Mrs. Miller was a stout woman with a sharp eye and a no-nonsense manner. "Sarah, do not overwhelm the poor girl," she said briskly, setting down the tea tray. "Miss Vance only needs to know what music to play, not every single detail of your wedding." "But Aunt Margaret, I want everything to be perfect," Sarah protested. "It will be perfect," Mrs. Miller said firmly. "Now drink your tea and let Miss Vance have a moment to breathe." Priscilla was grateful for the intervention. As she sipped her tea, she caught Jackson watching her with an odd expression, almost apologetic. When their eyes met, he gave her a small, rueful smile that seemed to say he knew Sarah could be overwhelming. Priscilla smiled back, feeling an unexpected moment of connection. The rest of the visit passed pleasantly enough, and as the sun began to set, Jackson announced they should head back to the ranch. Sarah walked them to the door, still talking about wedding details. "I am so glad we found you, Miss Vance," she said, squeezing Priscilla's hand. "You are going to make our wedding day so special. I just know it." The ride back to the ranch was quieter. Jackson seemed lost in thought, and Priscilla was content to watch the landscape darken as evening settled over the territory. Finally, Jackson spoke. "I apologize if Sarah was a bit much today. She gets excited about things." "There is nothing to apologize for," Priscilla said diplomatically. "She is a bride planning her wedding. It is natural to want everything to be perfect." "Yes, I suppose so." Jackson was quiet for a moment, then added, "She is a good woman. She will make a fine wife." Again, that oddly formal tone, as if he was trying to convince himself. Priscilla decided it was not her place to question his feelings. People married for many reasons in the West: companionship, practical considerations, family expectations. Perhaps Jackson and Sarah simply had a more reserved relationship. Not everyone was swept away by passionate love. They arrived back at the ranch as full darkness fell. Jackson helped Priscilla down from the wagon and walked her to her cabin, carrying a lantern to light the way. "Mrs. Chen will ring the bell for supper in about an hour," he said. "Just come to the main house when you hear it, and Miss Vance, thank you again for agreeing to do this. It truly does mean a lot." "You are welcome, Mr. Sullivan," Priscilla replied. "Good night." She entered the cabin and lit the lamp Jackson had shown her earlier. The small space looked cozy in the lamplight, and someone, probably Mrs. Chen, had left fresh water in the pitcher and a vase of late-season wildflowers on the table. Priscilla unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses on pegs and arranging her music books on the table. This would be her home for the next 3 weeks. When the dinner bell rang, she made her way to the main house. The kitchen was large and warm, dominated by a big cast-iron stove where Mrs. Chen was dishing up food. A long table could seat a dozen people, and the ranch hands were already filing in, removing their hats and washing their hands at a basin by the door. Jackson sat at the head of the table and indicated that Priscilla should sit to his right. Mrs. Chen sat at the other end, with Tom Chen beside her and the cowboys filled in the rest of the seats. It was clearly an established routine, comfortable and familial. The meal was delicious. Beef stew with vegetables, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Conversation flowed easily, the men discussing ranch work, Mrs. Chen sharing gossip from town, and Tom Chen occasionally interjecting with dry humor. Priscilla found herself relaxing, enjoying the camaraderie. It reminded her, painfully, of family dinners from her childhood before everything had fallen apart. Jackson was a different man here among his people than he had been in town with Sarah. He laughed more easily, joined in the conversation with genuine interest, and clearly cared about his employees. He asked Tom about a problem with one of the fence lines and made sure all the cowboys had what they needed for an upcoming cattle drive to the railhead. After dinner, Jackson asked Priscilla to stay for a moment. "I should show you the piano," he said after the others had left. "It is in the front room." He led her to a corner of the room she had not noticed earlier. Covered with a cloth was an upright piano, much nicer than the battered instrument at the saloon. Jackson removed the cloth with an almost reverent gesture. "This was my mother's," he explained. "She brought it all the way from Ohio when my parents first came west. She used to play every evening. After she passed when I was 15, no one has touched it. I keep it tuned, though. There is a piano tuner who comes through Montana City twice a year. I had him work on it just last month, thinking that maybe Sarah would play, but she says she never learned." Priscilla ran her fingers over the keys, pressing one gently. The note rang out pure and clear, perfectly in tune. "It is a beautiful instrument," she said. "A Steinway, is it not?" "You know pianos," Jackson said, sounding impressed. "Yes, it is a Steinway. My mother was very proud of it. She said if she had to live in the wilderness, at least she would have good music. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman." She was. Jackson's voice grew soft with memory. "She taught me to read using poetry books. She insisted on civilization, as she called it, even out here. My father used to tease her about it, but he loved that about her. He said she brought beauty to the harsh land." Priscilla sat on the piano bench and played a few bars of a Chopin nocturne, one of her favorites. The music filled the room, rich and melancholy. When she finished, she looked up to find Jackson staring at her with an expression of profound emotion. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. "I have not heard music like that in this house since I was a boy. Thank you." "Your mother had good taste in instruments," Priscilla said, feeling oddly moved. "This piano is a joy to play. I will be honored to play it at your wedding. Would you consider playing it sometimes before then?" Jackson asked. "In the evenings, perhaps. I know I am already paying you for the wedding, but I would pay extra to hear music in this house again. It feels right, somehow." Priscilla considered. "You need not pay me extra. I would enjoy the practice, and it has been a long time since I played a properly maintained instrument. If it would not disturb the household, I would be happy to play in the evenings." "It would not disturb anyone," Jackson assured her. "The men would probably enjoy it too. Music is a rare thing out here." And so it was settled. Over the following days, Priscilla established a routine. She would spend her mornings exploring the area around the ranch, taking walks through the grasslands and enjoying the sharp, clean air. Afternoons, she would practice on the Steinway, working on the pieces for the wedding and reacquainting herself with classical compositions she had not played in years. Evenings after supper, she would play for an hour or two, and gradually, an audience would gather. At first, it was just Jackson, sitting in one of the chairs by the fireplace, listening with his eyes closed. Then Mrs. Chen began to stay after clearing the supper dishes, sitting quietly with her mending. Tom Chen joined her, and eventually the cowboys started filtering in, standing awkwardly at first, then sitting on the floor or leaning against the walls. No one spoke during the music. They just listened, hungry for beauty in their hard lives. Priscilla found herself looking forward to these evening concerts more than she wanted to admit. There was something deeply satisfying about playing for people who truly appreciated the music, who listened with their whole hearts. And she found herself increasingly aware of Jackson's presence, of the way he listened with such intensity, of the grateful looks he gave her when the music ended. During the days, she saw less of him. He was busy with ranch work, often gone from dawn until dusk. But sometimes he would appear in the afternoon while she was practicing, would stand in the doorway listening for a few minutes before quietly slipping away. Once, she caught him watching her with such naked longing on his face that it startled her, but when he noticed her looking, he quickly schooled his expression and left. Priscilla tried not to think about what that look might mean. He was engaged to Sarah Miller. In less than 3 weeks, he would be a married man. Whatever that expression had been, it could not, should not, mean anything. 10 days before the wedding, Jackson announced at breakfast that he needed to go into town for the day to meet with the minister and finalize details. "Miss Vance, would you like to come along?" he asked. Sarah wanted to know if you could meet with her again to go over the music one more time. Priscilla agreed, though she felt a certain reluctance to leave the peaceful routine of the ranch. They set off mid-morning, the November air crisp and cold. Jackson had bundled heavy blankets in the wagon, and Priscilla was grateful for them as they drove. "You have been here almost 2 weeks now," Jackson said as they traveled. "What do you think of ranch life?" "Is it very different from the saloon?" "It is extraordinarily different," Priscilla said honestly. "I had forgotten what it was like to be part of a household, to share meals and conversation with people. The saloon was lonely, even when it was crowded with people. Everyone there was alone, really, just temporarily sharing the same space." "I can imagine," Jackson said. "I have always been glad I had the ranch. Even when my father died, I was not alone. I had the men, had purpose and work. I think loneliness might be the hardest thing about the West. All this space, all this land, and yet people are isolated in their own little corners of it. Is that why you are marrying?" The question was out before Priscilla could stop herself. To not be alone, Jackson was silent for a long moment, his hands steady on the reins. "That is part of it," he finally said. "A ranch needs a wife, a family, and Sarah is a good woman who will make a proper rancher's wife. She deserves security and a good home, and I can provide that. It seems like a sensible arrangement." "Sensible," Priscilla repeated, "but what about love?" He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Love is a luxury not everyone can afford out here, Miss Vance. Practical considerations matter. Shared goals, compatible temperaments, mutual respect. Those things build a solid marriage. But surely you feel something for her." "Some affection, some attraction, of course." But his answer came too quickly, too defensively. "Sarah is a lovely woman. Any man would be fortunate to marry her." Priscilla subsided, realizing she had overstepped. It was not her place to question his choices. Yet she could not shake the feeling that something was wrong, that Jackson was making a terrible mistake. The way he spoke about his impending marriage lacked any real warmth or joy. He sounded like a man facing a duty rather than a celebration. They arrived in town, and Jackson dropped Priscilla at the boarding house before going to meet the minister. Sarah was waiting, as excited as ever about the wedding preparations. "Only 10 more days," she trilled, pulling Priscilla into the parlor. "I can hardly believe it. Everything is coming together so perfectly. My dress arrived from St. Louis last week. Would you like to see it?" Without waiting for an answer, Sarah rushed upstairs and returned with a beautiful gown of ivory silk with lace overlays. It was indeed a lovely dress, clearly expensive, far finer than anything Priscilla had seen in Montana territory. "Jackson insisted I order it from the best dressmaker in St. Louis," Sarah said proudly. "He said I should have exactly what I wanted. He is very generous, you know. This ranch will give me a much more comfortable life than I could have had otherwise." "What do you mean, otherwise?" Priscilla asked, curious about the phrasing. Sarah looked slightly uncomfortable. "Well, Aunt Margaret cannot support me forever. Her boarding house makes enough to keep us fed and housed, but there is no extra. I could have tried to find work as a teacher or governess, but those positions are scarce. When Jackson began courting me, it seemed like Providence. A good man with a successful ranch, able to provide well. And he is not bad-looking either." Priscilla felt a growing dismay. Sarah spoke of the marriage as if it were primarily a business transaction, a way to secure her future. There was no mention of love, of genuine feeling for Jackson as a person. "You love him?" Priscilla asked bluntly. Sarah blinked, looking surprised by the question. "Love? Well, I am fond of him, certainly. He is kind and patient, and he gives me whatever I ask for. I suppose that is a kind of love, is it not? The practical kind that lasts. My aunt says romantic love is for novels and songs, that real marriages are built on more solid foundations." "I see," Priscilla said, though she did not really. Perhaps she was too much of a romantic herself, but the idea of marrying without real love seemed desperately sad. How could two people pledge their lives to each other without that essential spark, that deep connection of souls? The rest of the visit passed in a blur. Sarah continued to chatter about wedding details, but Priscilla barely heard her. Her mind was churning with troubling thoughts. Both Jackson and Sarah seemed to view their marriage as a sensible arrangement, but neither seemed truly happy about it. Jackson avoided speaking of it when he could, and Sarah was more excited about the dress and the party than about the man she was marrying. When Jackson returned to collect her, Priscilla was grateful to escape. They rode back to the ranch in near silence, both lost in their own thoughts. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Despite the beauty, Priscilla felt an oppressive sadness settling over her. That evening, she played the piano with particular passion, pouring her confused emotions into the music. She played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, letting the melancholy notes express what she could not say aloud. When she finished, she looked up to find Jackson standing much closer than usual, just a few feet away, his face filled with such raw emotion that it took her breath away. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice rough. "Priscilla, may I call you Priscilla?" "Yes," she whispered, her heart suddenly pounding. "I need to tell you something," he began, then stopped, struggling with himself. "These past 2 weeks, having you here, hearing you play, talking with you, it has made me realize something. Something I should have realized before, but I was too blind or too stubborn." "Jackson, please," Priscilla said, rising from the piano bench. "Do not say something you will regret. You are engaged to be married." "That is just it," he said, taking a step closer. "I am engaged to a woman I do not love. I respect Sarah, I want to help her, but I do not love her. I thought that would be enough. I thought practical considerations were all that mattered. But then you came here, and I realized what I was missing. The connection, the understanding, the way my heart lifts when I see you, the way your music touches something deep in my soul. That is what marriage should be built on, not just practical arrangements. Priscilla's breath caught. She could not deny she felt it too, that growing attraction, that sense of rightness when she was near him. But acting on it would be wrong. You cannot break your engagement, she said. It would ruin Sarah's reputation. In a small town like this, she would be marked as a jilted woman. No one else would marry her. I know, Jackson said miserably. Believe me, I know. I have been wrestling with this for days. I gave my word. I made promises. But how can I marry her feeling the way I do? Would that not be even more wrong, to bind her to a man whose heart belongs to someone else? And what of my feelings? Priscilla asked, her voice shaking. You assume I return your regard, but I am leaving for San Francisco after your wedding. I have plans, a future I am working toward. You return my feelings? Jackson asked, his gray-blue eyes searching her face. Tell me the truth, Priscilla. Do you feel anything for me? She wanted to lie, wanted to deny it, but she could not. Yes, she admitted, I do, but it does not matter. You are engaged. In 10 days, you will marry Sarah Miller, and I will play the piano at your wedding, and then I will leave for California, and this will all be a memory. It does not have to be that way, Jackson said urgently. I could speak to Sarah, explain that I cannot go through with the wedding. Yes, it would cause talk, but I would make sure she was provided for. I would give her money enough to go back to St. Louis or wherever she wanted. She would not be destitute. And what about her heart? Priscilla challenged. You said yourself she is a good woman. She does not deserve to be cast aside. But she does not love me either, Jackson argued. Did you not see it? She cares more about the security I provide than about me as a person. We would both be miserable in a loveless marriage. Would it not be kinder to end it now before vows are spoken? Priscilla pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed. Everything he said made a certain amount of sense, but breaking an engagement 10 days before the wedding would cause immense scandal. Sarah would be humiliated, her aunt would be furious, and the whole town would talk of nothing else for months. It would follow Sarah wherever she went. I need time to think, she said. This is all too much, too fast. Please, Jackson, do not do anything rash. Let me think about this. He nodded reluctantly. I will give you time, but I want you to know, Priscilla, that I meant every word. I care for you deeply, more than I thought possible. Whatever happens, that will not change. That night, Priscilla lay awake in her cabin, watching moonlight stream through the window. Her mind would not settle. Part of her was thrilled by Jackson's declaration, by the knowledge that her growing feelings were returned. But another part, the practical part that had kept her alive and independent for years, recognized the impossibility of the situation. If Jackson broke his engagement to Sarah, the scandal would be enormous. Sarah would be devastated and angry, rightly so. The town would turn against Jackson for jilting her, and by extension against Priscilla for being the cause. It would make staying in Montana territory impossible for her, but that was fine since she planned to leave anyway. But what about Jackson? He had to live here, had built his life and business here. Could he survive the social consequences, and yet, was it not worse to marry without love? Her own parents had married for love, had been devoted to each other until death took them. That was what she had always dreamed of for herself, if she ever married. Could she really encourage Jackson to go through with a loveless marriage just to avoid scandal? Morning brought no easy answers. At breakfast, Jackson looked like he had not slept either. Mrs. Chen watched them both with shrewd eyes but said nothing. The day passed slowly, with Priscilla too restless to practice properly. She went for a long walk instead, bundled against the cold, trying to clear her head. She returned to find Tom Chen waiting for her outside the barn. The foreman was a man of few words, but he had a quiet wisdom that Priscilla had come to respect. "Miss Vance, might I speak with you?" he asked. "Of course, Mr. Chen." "I have worked for Jackson Sullivan for 7 years now," Tom said without preamble. "He is a good man, fair and honest. In all that time I have never seen him truly happy until you arrived. Oh, he was content enough, took satisfaction in his work, but there was no joy in him. These past 2 weeks, that has changed. He smiles more, laughs more, seems more alive. My wife has noticed it too." "Mr. Chen, I am not sure what you want me to say," Priscilla began, but he held up a hand. "I am not asking you to say anything. I am merely observing that true happiness is rare in this world. When it is found, it should not be easily discarded. I know Jackson is engaged to Miss Miller. I also know that engagement came about more from obligation and practicality than from any real feeling. You did not ask for my opinion, but I am giving it anyway. Life is too short and too hard to spend it in a joyless marriage. My wife and I married for love against the wishes of both our families, and we have never regretted it, even when times were difficult. Love makes the hard times bearable and the good times glorious." With that, he tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Priscilla standing in the cold wind, his words echoing in her mind. That evening after supper, Jackson asked Priscilla to take a walk with him. They bundled up in coats and scarves and walked away from the buildings, toward a small rise that overlooked the ranch. The stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, so many more than could ever be seen in a city, scattered like diamonds across black velvet. "I have been thinking," Jackson said, "about what you said about Sarah and her reputation. You are right that breaking the engagement would hurt her, but I realized something today. If I marry her without love, I will hurt her worse in the long run. She will figure out eventually that my heart is not in the marriage. Women are not stupid. She will feel it, and it will poison whatever chance we might have at happiness." "Have you spoken to her?" Priscilla asked. "About your doubts?" "Not yet. I wanted to speak to you first, to know if there is any hope for us. Because if there is not, if you truly intend to leave for San Francisco and never look back, then perhaps I should just go through with the wedding after all. At least Sarah would have security and I would have companionship of a sort." Priscilla turned to face him, seeing his face in the starlight. "Jackson, I do care for you, more than I intended to, more than is wise under the circumstances, but I am afraid. Afraid of the scandal, afraid of what people will say and do, afraid of building my hopes on something that might not last." "I cannot promise we would not face difficulties," Jackson said honestly. "Breaking the engagement will cause talk, no question. And I am asking you to give up San Francisco, at least for now, to stay here with me. That is not a small thing. But I can promise you that I will spend every day trying to make you happy, trying to be worthy of the gift you would be giving me. I love you, Priscilla. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other 2 weeks, but I love you. I think I have loved you since that first night when I heard you playing in the saloon and saw the loneliness in your eyes that matched my own." Priscilla felt tears on her cheeks, freezing in the cold air. "I love you too," she whispered. "I tried not to, tried to guard my heart, but I failed completely. When I think of leaving here, of never seeing you again, it feels like losing a part of myself." Jackson pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against the cold and the uncertainty. "Then stay," he murmured into her hair. "Help me do the right thing, the hard thing. Help me break this engagement honorably and build a life with you instead." "How?" Priscilla asked. "How do we do this honorably?" "I will speak to Sarah tomorrow," Jackson said. "I will be honest with her. I will apologize for not being clear about my feelings sooner. I will offer her financial support, enough to relocate to St. Louis or anywhere else she chooses, enough to live comfortably, until she finds someone who can truly love her the way she deserves. And I will ask her to release me from our engagement. I cannot force her to agree, but I can ask. What if she refuses? Priscilla asked. What if she insists on going through with the wedding? Then I will still have to tell her the truth, Jackson said, that my heart belongs to someone else. She has the right to know that before she marries me. What she does with that information is up to her. It was decided. Priscilla felt both relieved and terrified. They walked back to the ranch holding hands, a silent promise between them. The next morning, Jackson hitched up the wagon early. I am going to speak with Sarah, he told Priscilla. Would you come with me? Not to be present for the conversation, but to wait nearby. I think she may want to speak with you afterward. The drive into town was tense. Jackson was pale but determined, and Priscilla felt sick with nerves. They arrived at the boarding house mid-morning. Jackson helped Priscilla down, and they stood together for a moment. Whatever happens, thank you, Jackson said. Thank you for making me see what was missing from my life, for making me believe that love is worth fighting for. He went inside, and Priscilla waited in the wagon, wrapped in blankets against the cold. Through the window, she could see movement in the parlor but could not hear any words. Time crawled past. After what seemed like an eternity but was probably only 30 minutes, the front door opened and Sarah emerged, her face flushed and angry. She marched straight to the wagon. You, she said, pointing at Priscilla. You did this. You came here and seduced him. I did nothing of the sort, Priscilla said, keeping her voice calm. I am sorry you are hurt, truly I am, but I did not set out to cause problems. But you did cause them, Sarah said, her voice rising. Jackson just broke our engagement, 10 days before the wedding. Do you know what this means? Everyone has been invited. The church is reserved. The food is ordered. My dress is hanging upstairs. And now he says he cannot marry me because he has feelings for someone else. For you. I am sorry, Priscilla said again, feeling helpless. This is not what I wanted. Is it not? Sarah's eyes were bright with tears. You are getting exactly what you wanted. Jackson, the ranch, security, everything that should have been mine. I did not come here to steal your intended, Priscilla said firmly. I came to play piano at a wedding and then move to San Francisco. I never expected any of this. But you are not moving to San Francisco now, are you? Sarah said bitterly. You are staying here with him. Before Priscilla could answer, Jackson emerged from the house. Sarah, please, he said. Do not blame Priscilla. This is my fault, my choice. I should have been honest with you and myself much sooner. You humiliated me, Sarah said, whirling on him. How am I supposed to face anyone in this town? Everyone will know I was jilted. You were not jilted, Jackson said quietly. I am taking full responsibility. I will tell anyone who asks that I was not worthy of you, that I realized I could not be the husband you deserve. I will make sure no blame falls on you. And I meant what I said inside. I will give you $500, enough to start fresh wherever you want to go. I do not want your money, Sarah said coldly. I want what you promised me. A wedding, a home, a future. I know, and I am sorrier than I can say, but I cannot give you that, not honestly. You deserve someone who loves you completely, not someone going through the motions. Sarah looked between them, her face a mixture of anger and hurt. Fine, she finally said. Keep your money and your ranch and your precious love, but know this, you have made an enemy today. I will make sure everyone knows what kind of man you are, what kind of woman she is. You will both regret this. She turned and ran back into the boarding house, slamming the door. Jackson stood staring after her, his expression pained. That went as badly as it could have, he said quietly. I knew she would be angry, but I had hoped she might understand eventually. She is hurt, Priscilla said. Give her time. Perhaps once the initial shock wears off, she will see that this is better for everyone. But Sarah was true to her word. Over the next few days, the scandal ripped through Montana City like wildfire. The story, as told by Sarah and her aunt, painted Jackson as a heartless cad who had thrown over his innocent, intended for a saloon woman of questionable morals. Priscilla was described as a seductress who had deliberately targeted a soon-to-be married man. The fact that the truth was more complicated mattered little in the face of such juicy gossip. When Jackson went to town for supplies, he was met with cold stares and harsh words. Several longtime customers told him they would no longer do business with him. At church that Sunday, when Jackson and Priscilla attended together for the first time, they were met with whispers and hostile looks. Even the minister seemed uncomfortable, though he did not openly condemn them. After the service, as they walked to the wagon, a group of women, including Sarah and her aunt, deliberately turned their backs. It was a calculated snub, done publicly to make a point. "I am sorry," Jackson murmured to Priscilla. "I knew there would be talk, but this is worse than I expected." "Let them talk," Priscilla said, lifting her chin. "We know the truth. We know we tried to handle this as honorably as possible. Eventually, people will move on to the next scandal." But privately, she was not so confident. The hostility in town was palpable, and she worried about the long-term consequences for Jackson's business. If enough people refused to work with him, the ranch could suffer serious financial problems. Back at the ranch, however, they found support. Mrs. Chen hugged Priscilla when they arrived home. "Do not let the gossips trouble you," she said firmly. "Tom and I are happy for you both. We have eyes. We saw how things were." The ranch hands, too, were supportive. That evening, one of them, a young cowboy named Billy, spoke up at supper. "Boss, just want you to know we are all behind you. What you did took courage. Any man with eyes can see you and Miss Vance belong together. The rest can mind their own business." The others murmured agreement, and Jackson looked visibly moved. "Thank you, boys. That means more than you know." In the following week, as the date of the canceled wedding came and went, Priscilla and Jackson settled into their new reality. They made no attempt to hide their relationship, though they were careful to maintain propriety. Priscilla still stayed in the cabin, and Jackson made it clear to everyone that he would not dishonor her by presuming on their relationship before marriage, because he intended to marry her, of course. He had made that clear from the start. But first, they needed to let some time pass, to let the scandal die down a bit. A hasty second engagement would only fuel more gossip. Instead, they focused on getting to know each other more deeply. They took long rides around the ranch, with Jackson showing her every corner of his land and sharing his dreams for the future. They spent evenings by the fire, talking about everything from their childhoods to their hopes and fears. And of course, there was music. Priscilla played every night, and sometimes Jackson would join her, his voice rough but true as he sang old ballads. It was during one of these evenings, about a month after the broken engagement, that Jackson pulled out a small box. They were alone in the front room, the fire crackling cheerfully, and Priscilla had just finished playing a Mozart sonata. "I want to give you something," Jackson said, sitting beside her on the piano bench. "I know we have not been courting very long by traditional standards, and I know we cannot announce anything official yet without causing more talk. But I want you to know my intentions are serious and permanent." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small but clear diamond. "This was my mother's engagement ring. My father gave it to her when they decided to come west together. She wore it until the day she died, and then he kept it, saying he would give it to me when I found the right woman. After he passed, I found it among his things with a note saying he hoped I would only give it to a woman I truly loved. Priscilla felt tears welling up. Jackson, it is beautiful. I did not give it to Sarah, Jackson said quietly. I bought her a new ring from the jeweler in town. Somehow, I could not bear to give her my mother's ring. I told myself it was because I was saving it for something special, but the truth was, I knew in my heart she was not the one, not the way you are. He took the ring from the box and held it up. Priscilla Vance, I am asking you in private and from my heart, will you marry me? Will you stay here and build a life with me, help me turn this ranch into a home? Will you fill these rooms with music and laughter and someday, God willing, children? Yes, Priscilla said, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, I will marry you, Jackson Sullivan. I love you more than I ever thought possible. He slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her close and kissed her, a gentle kiss that promised love and devotion and a shared future. We will wait a bit longer before we announce the engagement publicly, Jackson said when they finally pulled apart. Give people time to forget about Sarah. Maybe by spring the talk will have died down enough. I can wait, Priscilla said, looking at the ring sparkling on her finger. As long as I know where my future lies, I can wait. Winter settled over Montana territory in earnest. Snow piled high, and the work on the ranch shifted to maintaining the livestock and keeping everyone warm and fed. Priscilla loved the coziness of the ranch in winter, loved the way everyone drew together against the cold. She helped Mrs. Chen with cooking and mending, learned about ranch management from Tom Chen, and even tried her hand at some of the gentler livestock chores. Most importantly, she and Jackson grew closer every day. They had progressed from infatuation to something deeper and steadier, a love built on genuine understanding and shared values. They made plans for their future, how they would expand the ranch, where they would build a bigger house someday, how many children they hoped to have. It all seemed gloriously possible. In late January, they received unexpected news. Mrs. Patterson, the milliner from town, drove out to the ranch in a sleigh, braving the cold and snow. She brought a letter addressed to Jackson. This came on the stage, she said, accepting a cup of hot coffee gratefully. From St. Louis. I thought it might be important, so I brought it out myself. Also, she lowered her voice conspiratorially, I wanted to see for myself how you two are getting on. Town gossip says Miss Vance is living here in sin, but I told them that was nonsense. I know you both better than that. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson, Jackson said gratefully. People have been quick to judge. People are always quick to judge what they do not understand, the older woman said wisely. Pay them no mind. Now I need to get back before the weather turns, but I am glad to see you both looking so happy. After she left, Jackson opened the letter. As he read, his expression grew surprised, then thoughtful. It is from Sarah, he said. You should read it. Priscilla took the letter with trepidation, but as she read, her tension eased. Sarah's anger had apparently cooled over the past months. In the letter, she apologized for her harsh words and her campaign of gossip. She explained that she had used the money Jackson gave her to move back to St. Louis, where she had reconnected with an old beau, a banker's son her parents had once hoped she would marry. They were now courting seriously. I can see now that you did me a favor, Sarah wrote, though I could not see it at the time. I was marrying you for security, not love, and that would have been wrong for both of us. I am happier now than I have been in years, and I hope you have found happiness too. I am sorry for the trouble I caused with my gossip. I have written to my aunt, asking her to set the record straight in town. It is the least I can do. I wish you and Miss Vance all the best. Perhaps one day we might even be friends." "She has found someone," Priscilla said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "Oh, Jackson, I am so glad. I have felt guilty about her, worried that we ruined her life." "It seems we may have inadvertently improved it," Jackson said, relief evident in his voice. "And if she tells her aunt to stop spreading gossip, that will help our situation considerably." Indeed, over the next few weeks, they noticed a change in attitude when they went to town. People were friendlier, less openly hostile. Apparently, Sarah's letter had done its work. The scandal was losing its power, fading into old news. As spring arrived, bringing green grass and wildflowers, Jackson decided the time was right. One Sunday after church, he stood up when the minister asked if anyone had announcements. "I would like to announce my engagement to Miss Priscilla Vance," he said clearly. "We plan to marry this summer, and everyone is invited to the wedding." There was a moment of shocked silence, then a smattering of applause. Not everyone was pleased. Priscilla could see some disapproving faces, but many people seemed genuinely happy for them. The minister came forward to shake Jackson's hand and congratulate them both. They set the wedding date for June, giving themselves time to plan properly. This time, there was no stress about impressing anyone or meeting anyone's expectations. They simply wanted a ceremony that reflected their love and their joy in finding each other. Priscilla wore a simple but beautiful dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Chen helped her sew. Jackson wore his best suit and his hair was neatly trimmed. The wedding took place at the ranch, not in the church, with the minister conducting the ceremony in the front room of the house, right beside the Steinway piano. All the ranch hands were there, dressed in their best clothes. Mrs. and Mr. Chen stood as witnesses. A few friends from town attended, including Mrs. Patterson and several other merchants who had come to know and respect Jackson over the years. It was a small gathering, intimate and perfect. Tom Chen gave Priscilla away, standing in for the father she had lost. As she walked across the room to Jackson, she saw the love shining in his eyes and felt her heart swell with happiness. They had come through scandal and hardship to reach this moment, and it was all the sweeter for the struggle. The vows were traditional, but when they spoke them, Priscilla knew they both meant every word with their whole hearts. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson kissed her with such tender passion that several people cheered. Afterward, there was food and celebration. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself with the wedding feast. And of course, there was music. Priscilla played the Steinway as a married woman for the first time, and Jackson stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, both of them glowing with happiness. That night, after the guests had left and the house was quiet, Jackson carried Priscilla over the threshold of his bedroom, which was now their bedroom. "Welcome home, Mrs. Sullivan," he murmured against her lips. "I have been home since the moment I met you," Priscilla replied. "I just did not know it yet." Their wedding night was everything Priscilla had dreamed of, tender and passionate and full of love. Afterward, lying in Jackson's arms, listening to his heartbeat slow to a steady rhythm, she marveled at how drastically her life had changed. A year ago, she had been alone, tired and hopeless, playing her last song in a saloon. Now she was married to a man she loved desperately, with a home and a family and a future full of promise. The first year of marriage brought adjustments, as all first years do. Priscilla had to learn ranch management, had to understand the rhythms of the seasons and the cattle business. Jackson had to learn to share his space and his decisions, to consider another person in all his plans. But they navigated these changes with patience and humor, growing closer through each small challenge overcome. Priscilla continued to play piano every evening, and these concerts became a beloved ritual not just for the household, but for neighbors who would sometimes drive over to listen. The ranch became known for its music, a little oasis of culture in the rough Montana territory. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Priscilla discovered she was expecting a child. Jackson was over the moon with joy, fussing over her and making sure she did not overwork herself. Mrs. Chen appointed herself as Priscilla's guardian, insisting she rest more and eat properly. Their son was born on a crisp October morning in 1880, exactly 2 years after Jackson had walked into that saloon and asked Priscilla to play at his wedding. They named him James Michael Sullivan, and he was healthy and strong, with his father's gray-blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. Watching Jackson hold his son for the first time, his face soft with wonder, Priscilla felt her heart might burst with love. This was what she had been searching for all those lonely years, this sense of belonging, of being part of something larger than herself. "Thank you," Jackson whispered to her, cradling the baby carefully. "Thank you for giving me this gift, for giving us this family." "Thank you for walking into that saloon," Priscilla replied. "Thank you for hearing the music and seeing past the tired piano player to the woman who was waiting for someone to truly see her." As the years passed, their family grew. A daughter, Ellen Rose, arrived 2 years after James, followed by another son, Thomas Andrew, 2 years after that. The original house became too small, so Jackson built a larger one, designed with Priscilla's input to include a proper music room with big windows overlooking the mountains. The Steinway piano was moved to this music room, where it held pride of place. Priscilla taught all 3 children to play, passing on the gift her own mother had given her. On Sunday evenings, the whole family would gather around the piano, singing and playing together, filling the house with music and laughter. The ranch prospered under Jackson's careful management and Priscilla's support. They expanded their herd, improved their breeding stock, and developed a reputation for quality cattle. The hands who worked for them stayed for years, treated fairly and paid well, loyal to a boss and his wife who valued them as people rather than just labor. Tom and May Chen remained with them, becoming like family. When Tom grew too old for the hard physical work of being foreman, he trained a successor but stayed on as a valued advisor. Mrs. Chen taught Priscilla and later Ellen the secrets of her wonderful cooking, ensuring those recipes would be passed down. Montana Territory became Montana State in 1889, and Montana City grew from a rough frontier town into a proper community with schools, churches, and businesses. The scandal that had once surrounded Jackson and Priscilla faded completely into history. They became respected pillars of the community, known for their integrity, their hospitality, and their dedication to bringing culture and education to the area. Priscilla never did make it to San Francisco, but she did not regret it. She had found something far more valuable than a respectable teaching position in a city. She had found love, family, and purpose. She had found home. When their children were older, she did start teaching piano to students from town, fulfilling her old dream in a different way. Her music room was filled with the sounds of young people learning to appreciate beauty and art, just as her mother had once taught her. She charged reasonable fees and often taught children from less wealthy families for free, believing that music should be accessible to all. Jackson supported her completely in this, just as she supported his dreams for the ranch. They made decisions together, respected each other's opinions, and never let the sun set on an argument. Their marriage became a model for their children, showing them what true partnership looked like. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1899, Jackson surprised Priscilla with a trip to San Francisco. "I know you always wanted to see it," he said. "And the children are old enough to manage without us for a few weeks. Let us take this adventure together." San Francisco was everything Priscilla had imagined: beautiful, exciting, cultured. They attended concerts and visited museums, stayed in a fine hotel and ate at elegant restaurants. But after 2 weeks, Priscilla was ready to go home. "I thought I might regret not coming here all those years ago," she told Jackson as they prepared to leave. "But I do not even a little. This is a wonderful place to visit, but Montana is home. Our ranch, our family, our life together, that is where I belong." "And I am where I belong as long as I am with you," Jackson replied, kissing her hand. "You are my home, Priscilla. You always have been." They grew old together, watching their children grow up and start families of their own. James took over running the ranch, proving to be as capable as his father. Ellen married a teacher from town and opened a school that became one of the finest in the state. Thomas became a veterinarian, using his skills to help the ranching community. On summer evenings, when the whole extended family gathered at the ranch for Sunday dinner, the house would ring with music and voices, with children's laughter and adult conversation. These were the moments Priscilla treasured most, seeing the legacy of love she and Jackson had built. In 1920, as they celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary, Jackson took Priscilla's hand and led her to the piano. They were both in their 70s now, their hair white, their faces lined, but their eyes still shone with love for each other. "Play our song," Jackson requested, settling into his favorite chair. Priscilla did not have to ask which song. She played "Beautiful Dreamer," the same song Sarah had requested all those years ago for a wedding that never happened. But instead of sadness, the song now held only joy and memories. She played it as Jackson had first heard it, through the window of a saloon when a lonely cowboy heard music and decided to take a chance on love. When she finished, Jackson was smiling, his eyes closed. "Perfect," he murmured. "Everything has been perfect because I found you." "I found you too," Priscilla said, going to sit beside him. "We found each other." They continued to live full lives well into their 80s. Jackson died peacefully in his sleep in 1928 at the age of 78. Priscilla held his hand as he passed, whispering her love and her gratitude for the beautiful life they had shared. She lived another 5 years without him, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her dearly. She played the Steinway until the very end, her fingers still finding the keys even when her body grew frail. On the morning of her death in 1933, at the age of 78, her family found her seated at the piano, her hands resting on the keys as if she had just finished playing. She wore a peaceful smile, and on the music stand was the sheet music for "Beautiful Dreamer." They buried her beside Jackson on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath the wide Montana sky. At the funeral, 3 generations of Sullivans played the piano in tribute, filling the air with the music she had loved and taught them. The Steinway remained in the family, passed down through generations, along with the story of how a lonely piano player and a rancher found love in the most unexpected way. How a woman playing her last song was given a second chance at happiness by a cowboy who asked her to play at his wedding, and then had the courage to change his mind and marry her instead. It became a family legend, told and retold to each new generation, a reminder that true love is worth fighting for, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you have made a mistake and correct it before it is too late, and that the most beautiful music is the life you create with the person you truly love. The ranch still stands today, operated by Sullivan descendants who remember their ancestors with pride and love. And in the music room, the Steinway piano still plays beautifully, cared for and cherished, a testament to a love that began with music and lasted a lifetime.